Live on YouTube.
Welcome to our weekly Q&A. I'm just going to hit the button here on my iPad because we're streaming to both YouTube and also to Facebook. So welcome. This is our, I think, fourth episode now of the weekly Q&A. And if you haven't caught one of these before, basically what I do is I just take an early question. This is a question that could have come in for one of the online courses, or questions that get emailed in, or that you guys submit just under the videos or on the Facebook. So take an early question, and then there's some time at the end that if you have any other questions that you want me to answer, they can be on any topic. It doesn't matter. I will just take as many as we have time for today. And I also, at the end of our session today, have an announcement about what's going to be going on next week. So we've got something exciting that's coming up, and that's going to start next Tuesday. But I'm just going to jump right in and read our first question here. And one of these days, it took me forever to get my mic on today because I have so many layers. Even though it doesn't look like it, I have many layers under this sweatshirt. And we had a late March snowstorm, so we're busy cleaning up for that. The plows and stuff are going in the background, so if you hear something, that's what's going on. And I hope that very soon I can be coming to you in a t-shirt, and or even just a long sleeve shirt instead of a pile of clothing. Okay, so this question came in from Louise, and I'm just going to paraphrase a little bit, but Louise says, I wonder if you could share your thoughts on whether or not previous training methods may affect how you and your horse connect, if the new method introduced to the horse seems so much more gentle. So a little bit of background is Louise has a mare that was trained using a type of method to constantly move her feet until she would submit. And just to scroll down a little bit, the real question, I think this is a really good topic to talk about, which is why I wanted to use it for our live session today, is when you're going to a softer approach with a horse that has been trained with higher levels of pressure, or with more, I think we can say, aggression or punishment, or even just pressure and release, but just higher levels of that pressure and more maybe aversive methods, will the horse view you as a pushover, or will they be confused by a softer approach? So the principles of using pressure that I try to adhere to, and I definitely don't do a perfect job of this, but this is what I strive for, is whenever we get the right response, we want to release pressure. So we always start as soft as we can, and when we get the right response, we release. But it's what to do with pressure in between there that frankly gets a little bit more tricky. So when the horse is resisting, and resisting, I like to think of it as resisting/trying. So if the horse is resisting, if they are basically looking for the right response. And a really interesting way to think about this is sometimes it is hard for us to judge whether the horse is just trying responses that aren't correct, or I think with the word resistance, we can think of it with more of a negative connotation that like they are they're refusing to do what we want to do, what we want them to do, or they are being really obstinate, or they're somehow, trying to assert their dominance. But it honestly can be hard for us to know whether the horse is truly in that state of mind, like the I don't want to do it state of mind, or if they're just trying responses that aren't the right one. So when we have resistance/trying, we want to keep our pressure the same. If we escalate pressure in those moments, we're going to get one of two things. We're either going to get a horse that is continues to escalate themselves, so then we kind of go into this fight mode, or the horse might just submit. And there's a lot of training methods that look for submission, but I've learned to think about it a little differently. And frankly, where I've kind of got more clarity around these principles for pressure, and also what really shifted my thinking was working with the natural lifemanship teams that come here for clinics. So if you haven't heard me mention them before, Natural Lifemanship is actually a group that does equine psychotherapy, but they are also excellent trainers, and I would call them behavior experts for both people and for horses. And they're really, really kind of experts at looking at, I would say, the interaction of behavior. So this is one of the things that really shifted my mindset, and again, gave me a lot of clarity around the language that I use to describe these principles of how we're using pressure in training. And then the other kind of option that the horse has, so if we ask the horse to do something, they can either cooperate, they can do what we ask, and then we release the pressure. They can resist, or they can be trying other things. Basically, they're just doing the wrong thing, and we keep the pressure the same, or they can ignore it completely. And if they ignore it completely, then we need to raise the pressure to a point where they're trying something. So it's kind of just the definition of using pressure and release as a training method, as negative reinforcement, is the pressure has to be at a level where the horse is recognizing it and is actively basically looking for that release, whether they know it and it's a really light pressure and an easy response, whether they don't know it and they have to search for a little bit. We have to raise the pressure to the point where they are searching for the right answer. So the tricky part comes in with horses that have been trained, as I think Louise's mare has been from the description, that in the past, when she has done the wrong thing, whether that was just she was getting the wrong response, or whether that was that she, was maybe more trying to get out of the work, as people would say, or trying to find other ways of resisting. So when she was in that place, the people that were working with her would probably increase the pressure quite a bit. And I have a feeling with this mare, they probably got some fight at first. So the mare learned to go big, and then she probably learned to submit. So the problem here is when a horse is trying, and they're basically trying, but they're just not getting the right answer, and we increase the pressure, either we're going to have a horse that does what's called a burst of behavior. So they're going to do what they were doing in an even bigger way, and now we can no longer control it. We can no longer maybe raise our pressure even more, and they're going to find a release there. And now all of a sudden the horse learns, even when we start small, to go really big in their behavior, because that's what works. So we either get a horse that learns to go kind of really big and overreact to things or be kind of explosive, or we have a horse that just submits. So they're no longer as much of an active participant in the training. They usually start to lose kind of motivation. They start to lose their, I think what it is for all animals, kind of a natural joy of learning. They lose that if they just feel like they're being kind of overpowered and coerced into doing things. And those are the two options that can happen. So to get to what do we do is really we want to try to stick with the principles. And usually the two that I think are going to be important for this particular mare is it sounds like she's become kind of desensitized to higher levels of pressure. So she ignores, she takes a lot of pressure, and then all of a sudden she explodes. And this is probably what has worked for her in the past, or I shouldn't say explodes, but she just does something in a big way, in too big of a way. So this is probably what's worked for her in the past. I'm just going to pull out a completely hypothetical example, but this is something that I see that ties into trailer loading, which was our discussion on the Q&A last week. And that was horses that you take them up to the trailer. Let's say two people are working together. So the person in front is pulling on the horse. The person behind is tapping with a whip, and they're tapping and they're tapping, and the horse is there, and the horse might be actively resisting, like he's leaning back and he's kind of pulling back and he's moving a little bit, and the two people keep pulling harder and going harder behind him. And then all of a sudden, the horse just loses it, and he leaps in the air and he kicks out. Well, now all of a sudden, the person that was behind him jumps out of the way, so that pressure stops. And he yanks the person out of the trailer, so that pressure stops. So that horse has just learned that as pressure increases, he kind of takes it, and then he learns to react in a really big way in order to release it. So the next time he's taken up to the trailer, he gets 2 steps away, and all of a sudden he just does the same thing before the person even comes behind him, like to start tapping with the whip. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. So what you want to do in order to overcome that is just keep the pressure the same. So if there's truly ignoring, you have to increase it to a point where there's motivation to try something, but then you have to keep it the same there. So I know this is, mostly a theory discussion because I'm not here demonstrating it, but let me kind of use another example to make it a little bit more practical. So let's say we have a horse that has picked an area of the arena that they don't want to go into. So this is kind of a typical lesson horse thing. So they don't want to go there. It's not necessarily that there's something scary, but they just would rather pull towards the gate or pull towards the arena door. So as you're coming around and you go to that area and you hit the point where the horse has learned to hit the brakes and do a little spin to the side and then pull back the other way. What we wouldn't want to do is go there and hit that resistance point and then just start wailing on the horse or start yanking on the rein to get him to go. That would be increasing pressure through the resistance. Instead, what we want to do is we go there, we find a secure body position, we apply the aid for steering. So we keep the rein aid for the horse to go into that corner. We keep our body really steady so we're not leaning forward and accidentally releasing in that way. We stay there, and the horse wiggles a little bit, and then he goes, and we release pressure. So that's hopefully kind of a more practical example of how to use these principles. And Louise, I really think that will be the case with your mare, is when she's ignoring, because she's learned to kind of be desensitized to potentially higher levels of pressures. Like she doesn't really listen until things get a little louder. You still want to start soft. So you don't want to just start in at that higher level, but you still start soft. You just increase until the point where you can see she is looking for the answer. And this is where sometimes it can be tricky, because if they are sometimes looking for the answer is even just getting a little more tight. So now they're paying attention. They know you're asking for something, but they're resisting in the form of, I'm not going to do it. And you don't want to keep increasing through there. That's different than ignoring. Ignoring is like, I haven't even noticed that you're asking me for anything. I'm distracted by something. So you want to start really soft, increase till you hit the point where there's resistance going on. Even if that resistance, it might not be movement, it might be, being still, but having that tension of, oh, I know you want me to do something, but I'm going to stand here. That's still resistance. You stay the same through there. You try to set up whatever the training exercise or whatever the task is, that the correct response is the easiest one, and then you're going to release on that. So long-winded answer, but I felt like that needed a little bit more background, especially for people that maybe aren't as familiar with, thinking about how to use pressure and some of the nuances of it. So now I will take your questions. If you guys have, was that helpful? And any questions either related or unrelated to that topic? And Julie is manning the questions, so I'll give her a minute to catch up on your comments.
We've got a quiet group on. No one's posted any questions yet.
All right. Well, I'll give you like another 2 minutes. I'll talk a little bit about what we've got coming up next week. So if you have a question in your mind, type it in. If not, we will just close out a little early today. So Frida, come. Frida was whining, so I just brought her up here. what we do twice a year is we run the Balanced Riding course. And the Balanced Riding course is an 8-week program. It's the one that kind of started me out in all of this years ago. It's the first one that I put together, and we've had lots of different additions. I'm always making changes to it and tweaking it from feedback and making it better. But it runs twice a year, spring and fall. The spring session is going to be opening up very soon. It's going to open up in April. And what I always like to do before we run any of these bigger courses is we put out some free training from the course. So it serves as an introduction to the course, and it also gives you a really good taste of what the course is about, how I teach in the courses, what some of the topics are. So it really is a good way to know if it's a good fit for you and if it's something that's appropriate for you at this stage of your riding. That is going to be coming out in the form of an online workshop. So we've got a Facebook group, and I'm going to be putting out a lot of free videos, doing more of these live sessions for that smaller group that's will be in the Facebook community, the Facebook group, and taking your questions and just really working through kind of some problems and specific things on changing the way that you learn riding. So what we're going to be focusing on in the workshop is how a lot of riding instruction can be somewhat ineffective when you're just getting like verbal instruction during a lot of traditional lessons, and how when you can think about incorporating different learning styles, understanding what your strongest learning style is, your preferred learning style, how you can change the way that you think of common like instructional phrases like heels down and shoulders back that are often taught during riding lessons, and then also how to apply training principles to both your horse and being able to solve problems or work through challenges with your horse, as well as actually applying them on yourself and on your own riding and having that kind of positive focus for your own learning. So that workshop is going to be starting next week on Tuesday, but we've got the Facebook group up and running, and you can sign up now so that you don't miss when the video comes out. So that's at balancedridingcourse.com. Julia will throw the link for you in the comments, and I hope to see you there. It's always a lot of fun doing the workshops. It's a lot of excitement, and again, it's a great way to know if the course is a good fit. And if you go on further and you join the course, you've got a head start. And if you want to just take advantage of the free training, there's great value in the free training too. We really put a lot of work into making that really valuable for everybody. All right, did we get any other questions that came in?
Do you have any advice on do you have any advice for beginner riders, new riders?
I would say make sure that you are riding at a place that's going to give you a good start, so this is one of my favorite expressions, is with anything that you learn, you don't need to become an expert in it, but you need to know enough to recognize an expert. So you're already on the right track if you're online watching these types of videos and doing research, because you want to learn enough that when you start going out to like lesson barns and you start going out to look for instructors or where you're going to ride, that you just know enough to recognize, are the horses well cared for? Does the instructor have your best interests in mind? And that sounds terrible to say, but really, do they care about your safety and your experience there and your riding future? And also, how do they interact with the horses? Is the training kind? Do they treat the horses with respect? That's just the most basic stuff, because my feeling is when you have that in place, when you have a barn, an instructor, a riding facility that takes good care of their horses, they really care about their horses and they care about their people, you can implement what you're learning there, even if it's not, the highest quality instruction. You can implement that you say, things that you learn from videos like this. You can take online courses, you can read books, and you can help kind of take that information to what you're practicing there. But you want to make sure that it's a place that kind of has those basic factors. And that will probably be the biggest thing in a good riding experience for you as a new rider, is making sure that you're at a barn that is a good barn, good atmosphere, because that's what makes it fun, and that's the most important part, really. We'll take one more if we have any others in.
So this is another one from YouTube. I think the name is Yurgi. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right. He said, I'm actually a new beginner, and whenever I try to kick the horse while trotting, my stirrups always go back to my heels, and I'm not sure how to correct it.
So I have a feeling you're probably, I'll just repeat the question in case anyone missed it. So it was, as a new rider, when you are trotting and trying to put leg on, the stirrups are sliding back towards the heel. So you're not able to keep your stirrups as you're using your leg. Most commonly when I see this happening, it's because the rider is gripping with their knee. So if you grip through your thigh and your knee, then you lose that even weight bearing on the stirrup from your whole leg and your body working in, could say, like an organized way. So if you grip through your thigh and you grip through your knee, then when you go to move your lower leg, you are going to end up losing the stirrup because you pull your foot up a little bit as the lower leg contracts as you try to move it, with the upper leg being tight. So what I would actually recommend is, even though this is a little contrary to how a lot of people think and teach, is I will often start my new riders knowing how to use a whip well, because when you can learn to follow the movement of the horse and just get that movement idea of being able to go with the motion and keep weight steady on the stirrups, and then incorporate smaller movements of your leg, keeping the weight steady, and you use the whip when you need basically more pressure to get the horse to go, then it makes for kind of those smaller stepping stones of, you learn how to keep your leg organized, so to speak. You learn how to keep the weight in the stirrup, and you can work through smaller movements, and then eventually you'll be able to use your leg in a bigger motion, but you'll have that skill of keeping the weight in the stirrup. So long story short, I would think about not gripping with your knee and your thigh. I would guess that that's probably going on. Ride with the whip so that you can focus on that. And I also have a video, it's a recent one, if you type in losing stirrups at CRK Training Blog, it'll come up. I forget the exact title. So take a look at that. That should be helpful. And I think we are going to sign off for today, but thank you so much for the questions. Thank you for being on live, and definitely join me in that riding workshop. So that's, again, balancedridingcourse.com to sign up early for that. So I will see you in that private Facebook group, and I'll see you back next week for our Q&A.